Today, we the people got more say in our elections. In 1908, voters approved by a more than 2-to-1 margin an amendment to the Maine Constitution that establishes the right to a people's veto by referendum and an initiative by petition at general and special elections. The amendment becomes effective January 6, 1909. Maine becomes the first eastern state to embed into law the people's right to statewide initiatives and referendums. Historians say the amendment owes much of its existence to Ronald T. Patton out of Skowhegan, an editor out of the Somerset Reporter newspaper. Patton had begun to advocate for the idea in the early 1890s. He succeeded in getting the bill submitted to the legislature in 1907. With the momentum on the issue building, legislators approved handily a bill on amending the Maine Constitution despite opposition from banks, timberland owners, and railroads. Until tomorrow, I'm Brian Sullivan.